What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gooner channel. And, well, West Ham hammered us out of the League Cup last night. And, yes, it is disappointing. Of course it is. I'm not going to lie. Of course it's disappointing to go out of any cup competition. You're always going to be disappointed when you get beaten, particularly with a place in the quarterfinals and, a lot of big teams out of it. I've seen a lot of people saying that it's because we don't take the competition seriously enough. And I've also seen a lot of people criticising Arsenal fans for pretending like we don't care about it. And that's not fair. But my question to you would be, how am I supposed to be really disappointed about not winning the League Cup when we last won it in 1993? The only time before that we'd won it was 87. There's only one Arsenal manager in the whole history of our club that's ever won this trophy. I remember both, and 1987 was a massive win because it was the first trophy George Graham had won, and you could argue that it built the way for further success. And I think that it does that. It's a great competition to win to give your team that lift. A team in the top 6 places look what Man United last season won it, and it was without it, their season would have been a bit of a shambles. With it, there were arguments about did they have a better season than us. I don't think I'd have swapped with them. I'm not denigrating the League Cup. I would love us to win it. I've been disappointed the finals we've lost. It's been pretty bad showing in the finals. But, how can I be disappointed? This is a tradition at Arsenal. Arsene Wenger always played second string teams. So I don't think it's an unimportant trophy. It's just not one that's particularly in our sphere. We don't win the League Cup because we always play players that would otherwise not get a chance. So we give people their start in the League Cup. And yesterday, the team that Arteta put out before the kickoff, it was a second string side. And, you'd be lying if you said that there wasn't some preparation for the game against Newcastle. We've got a massive game. Odegaard was dropped, and I think a lot of us feel that was probably a good move, given that he's not looked himself since coming back from Norway's defeat to Spain. Fabio Vieira got a start. Emil Smith-Rowe before kickoff was a real kick in the guts because the last thing Emilzinho needs right now is another injury. But overall, Eddie Nketiah starting up front, that was a first choice pick. He played on the weekend and scored a hat-trick in the Premier League, so you'd figure that he was going to be at least playing to similar levels. Trossard got a start. He's a great player. Kai Havertz was in. Jorginho's in. Yes, we rested a lot of players, but Kivior came in. Zinchenko on the left. Ben White on the right. And Ramsdale. Everyone's wanted to see more of Ramsdale. Everyone's wanted to see Ramsdale have a chance to prove himself. Our team that went out there last night should have been good enough to beat West Ham. And it's a squad game, and this is the difficulty I have. When you're criticising Arteta for playing a second string team and not taking the competition seriously enough, are we also criticising Eddie Howe for doing exactly the same thing? Now, in fairness, Eddie Howe was taking his team to the Walking Dead of Manchester United with a dead man walking in charge. And quite honestly, I think Port Vale's probably tougher competition at the moment than Man United. But no one's saying Eddie Howe's not taking the competition seriously enough. He got to the final last season. Man City are out. Did they not take the competition seriously enough? Tottenham didn't take the competition seriously enough. And let's be honest, they're not going to win the Premier League this season. They might have a good cup run in the FA Cup, but this is probably their best chance of silverware. And they didn't take it seriously enough. Postecoglou made 8 changes and they got dumped out by Fulham. Liverpool, you could argue, have taken it seriously enough, but most teams haven't taken this competition seriously enough. If by seriously enough, you mean playing the first 11. And if you're going to play the first 11 every single game, we're going to hit the same problems we had last season. There is a reason why Champions League teams don't field strong sides in the League Cup. I think you have to accept that. Arteta's called recently for a look at this. We need possibly bigger squads if we're going to play every 3 days. And had we beaten West Ham yesterday, we would now have a difficult, at best you could say, a difficult trip to Liverpool. And, presumably if we play our best team then sandwiched between a Premier League game and a Champions League game and we pick up injuries, it's just not possible to play your first 11 all the time, and you shouldn't anyway. Now, if the criticism here is that the squad isn't good enough, well, let's have a look at that, because I think that we did find something out yesterday. And for me, it wasn't even so much that West Ham won this game. It was that we kind of lost it. Now, I'm not being salty. I think fair play to West Ham. There was a point where I wondered if we'd done a deal with them to throw this game as part of Declan Rice transfer. I mean, Ben White's own goal is just not typical Ben White at all. I don't know what he was thinking. And, you know, another talking point has to be that Ramsdale was dragged down, but there's no VAR. And I'm not going to start complaining that VAR should have been involved, because I quite like the fact that at least in the League Cup every season you get to play without VAR interference. But the first goal, I don't think was the nail in the coffin. When we got to half-time, I wasn't necessarily thinking we were definitely out of this. I don't think I would have made wholesale changes. But there was that 15-minute spell in the second half where it was just over. And Zinchenko at the back, you know, look, he's clearly not the world's best left back. But I thought he played really well in midfield. I thought when he was up front, he was one of those players at least making key passes. The way he got done by Kudus is I mean, look, Kudus, he was one of the players everyone was talking about in the transfer window. He was a big signing, and it was a real surprise he went to West Ham, and I think it was a good choice, but he hasn't set the world alight yet. Beautiful bit of skill to trap the ball, drag it back and score. I don't think Ramsdale could have saved that one. He certainly wasn't getting to Ben White's bullet header. And although it looked really bad, the third goal came off Kivior's thigh and sort of took a wicked deflection and had Ramsdale flapping a bit at it. But apart from that, I mean, West Ham had 3 shots on target and scored with them. And after the third goal, when we made those substitutions, which I have no idea why we bothered bringing on Martinelli, Saka and Odegaard, and no one was cheering Odegaard's goal, although I suppose it is one of the only bright points of the game that he looks back to his kind of strongest form just in time for the trip to Newcastle. But West Ham didn't really play that well. We just played, and it wasn't even that I think we played badly. I think in isolation, if you looked at the performance of Fabio Vieira, if you looked at Kai Havertz and Jorginho, they weren't playing badly. They're possibly not quite the creativity we're looking for. Trossard had a weak game. And it's strange that he never seems to start games well. And maybe that's because when he starts games, he's not in the first 11. I thought Reece Nelson looked good, but, you know, he had no one. I mean, Eddie Nketiah, for me, I don't know what to say about it, because I've done a video after the Sheffield United game saying, were we wrong about Eddie? And now it feels like I could do a video going, no, we weren't wrong about Eddie at all. Because that was not the performance of a Premier League striker. And we just seem to have these games in us. And I feel for Arteta. He's getting criticised for not taking the competition seriously enough. In his press conference afterwards, he said, I drummed it into these players for 48 hours before the game that this was an important game and what to expect. And on the day, they just didn't seem interested. And that is a problem. Because in a squad of 25, you need everyone to take their chances when they come in. Just like Newcastle did. Just like the players at Newcastle did. Just like City players always do. And then you have to look at it. Now, for me, it's still a bit early to make definitive conclusions, but I'm over Fabio Vieira. I don't rate him and I don't like him, and I'm prepared to eat a lot of humble pie if he turns out to be a great player for us, but I just don't see it. And Eddie, I kind of feel like I'm in that same zone with him again. He might, I don't know, he might go to Newcastle, he might pick him, he might be in the starting lineup and he might score a hat-trick against Newcastle St James Park. I don't think anyone really thinks he will. But if I was Arteta, he'd be the first player I dragged into a room. I would sit down with Eddie and I would go, that performance, you don't need someone to tell you it wasn't good enough. It was not good enough. Yeah, it was a physical game. There was no running, there was no purposefulness. There was nothing that showed desire. Did the players all have their minds set on Newcastle? Well, I can't see how they would have. You know, a lot of those players probably aren't going to start. Our defensive performance was atrocious. And, you know, aberration, it can happen. Ramsdale, I think when he was first dropped for Raya, all of us were surprised. Many of us felt it was unfair. Raya has flapped a lot but kept clean sheets. I don't think there's many people now that would pick Ramsdale at St James's Park over Raya. But Arteta to be criticised for this, what more can you do? You put out the team that you have to put out to keep players fresh for Newcastle. if there were criticisms, I think it was in the fact that he brought players on when it was already 3-0 down. You know, at 3-0 down, I think you could have brought on a Fantastic Four and all the Avengers assembled and you still weren't going to win that game. So I don't really see the point of it. Yes, Odegaard scored that goal. And like I said earlier, I thought that was the one bright point. He looked the dynamic Odegaard that we're used to. Martinelli didn't do much. To Zinchenko, for St James's Park, I would like to see Zinchenko start in that midfield berth. I'm going to do a video about, but I think he played really well in the midfield. I don't think he looks interested defending. So, you know, to the narrative, oh, Arsenal don't take this competition seriously enough. Well, we didn't play our first 11, no, but we do have an incredibly difficult game coming up in the Premier League, and we do not want to be dropping points. I think most of us would take a draw out of that St James Park game. But in order to get that draw, we are going to need all of our best players. And it's starting to look like there are a handful of players in the squad who, when you really need them, don't show up. So for me, that's Eddie Nketiah, that's Fabio Vieira. They're the two that really stand out for me. I think it's time to be looking at other options, really. Anyway, I want to hear what you think. You gutted we're not in it? If you are an Arsenal fan and you're gutted we're not going to win the League Cup this year, you must have had a very tough 30 years because we just don't win the League Cup. And I can't explain it. It's like the other thing that we don't do is win the Champions League. I hope that we qualify from the group for the Champions League and hope we get to the quarterfinals of that at least. But we're going to have to play first team players because on the evidence of last night, chucking Fabio, Kai Havertz and Jorginho in together on their own, or Fabio, Kai Havertz and Jorginho, I hope we qualify. I hope we go all the way in the Champions League. It wouldn't be great. You know, certainly no one is going to be complaining that we haven't won the League Cup if we can win one of the other trophies we're in. And the quadruple's off, and let's just deal with that, right? Was it ever really on? Anyway. As an Arsenal fan, I don't presume to speak for you, so I'd love to hear from you if you're really angry about the performance. And I think it's fair to be angry. And maybe it's right to be angry with Arteta because after all, he put that team out there. But I think you have to look to some of these players. When we're playing with that kind of lack of desire, we weren't outthought by West Ham, but we might have been out-muscled. And just as a final thing, so you know that it's not me blaming the referee, but what a shocker. You know, that was some seriously dodgy refereeing, and it's one of the only times I can ever remember wishing there was VAR. So that's how bad that was. But overall, we go to St James's Park, we've rested players, we have far fewer injury worries than them. There's a good chance that we get something out of that game and we can all forget about the League Cup forever. There are plenty of games coming up, and after Newcastle, it's a pretty good run for us. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think, and sorry I haven't made a lot of videos this week. I've been really unwell. So send me your sympathy by hitting like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until I see you again, be lucky. Lots of love.